From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio's How Stuff Works.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
They call me Ben. We are joined as always with our super producer, Paul Mission Control Deckant. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this stuff they don't want you to know. How you feeling today, Matt?
I'm feeling well. It's finally colder here, so much colder than it has been that I get to wear my black leather gloves and my big black jacket and my black hat when I'm driving, and I feel like some kind of anti-super serial killer hero.
Side note, Paul Mission Control Deckant just chimed in with serial killer. I don't know if that made it on the mic.
No, I don't think it did, but that's why it was a super serial killer hero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, driving with your balaclava on, right?
Yeah, it just feels good.
Yeah, I believe this is one of the states where it is technically illegal to operate a motor vehicle wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Have you heard about that?
Probably, but they haven't caught me yet.
Yeah, I don't see how that would apply to things that require helmets like motorcycles and so on. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, yeah, I also felt this strange switch. Suddenly we woke up and it was fall, or maybe we skipped fall and it's just winter now.
Yeah, it's getting pretty close.
And, like many people dealing with the rapidly changing climate, we are discovering a paradigm shift in conversation. Remember those old halcyon days where it was considered boring or small talk to talk about the weather? When we were growing up, that's something old people and boring people did.
Yeah. But I think maybe we're just a little older and more boring.
That is a valid assertion.
It's happening more frequently in my life, at least.
Or I would say a valid proposition, because I would argue that now that the weather is becoming so unpredictable and wild card-esque, we all tend to talk about the weather more because we have to check in because no one knows what's going to happen.
It's now a valid concern.
It is. We're no longer shooting the breeze. We're ensuring people's safety and livelihood. You don't know. If you ask somebody what the weather's like in their part of town, they might say, well, the tornado has gained sentience, which we were not expecting, but scientists say that's because we didn't recycle or something like that. You know
sure.
What I mean? I'm exaggerating a bit, but today's episode is in a way about the weather. It is in a way about the environment, because whether you live in the frozen wilds of the Arctic North or the sweltering climes of the tropic or the, objectively perfect environment of Hawaii, you've doubtlessly had one of those weird conversations about weather with outsiders. Yes, says somebody in the upper reaches of Scandinavia, sometimes the sun sets at 4 p.m. here. Other times it's dark for, weeks on end, or the sun just doesn't leave at all. It's normal for us. And while weather across the planet can vary to a wide degree, it is pretty impressive that our species, most of whom we're largely identical to one another in terms of physiological requirements, it's impressive that we can all exist for long periods of time in these very different conditions, I think,
And our cultures have kind of been tailored in a lot of ways to these different weather patterns and the climates in which we've, existed.
Yeah.
Religions are born a lot of times, early on at least, out of these patterns.
Good call, right? We're tool makers. We're arrogant. We are explainers, and we are woefully satisfied with our own explanations.
Yeah, but we're also feelers, because we've got a lot of chemicals that float around in us that cause us to feel ways, or at least they affect the way we feel about things sometimes.
Right. And I was thinking about this too with the old Robert Frost poem, Tree at My Window. You remember that?
I do.
So there's this line, tree in my window is obviously, it's about this tree that Robert Frost is really digging at the time. Or to be fair, the speaker of the poem, if not, maybe he's faking it. Maybe he didn't have a tree.
It could be a character.
Yeah, maybe it's like a metaphor for nuclear war or something. Who knows, right? Yeah. Well, there's this thought in the last two lines where he talks about the tree experiencing outer weather and himself, or again, the speaker of the poem, being concerned with their own inner weather. And today's episode is about that. I love that you set up the idea of all these neurochemicals and reactions just bouncing willy-nilly and unseen in every person's brain box, because today's episode does not center around climate change. It's about a more primal question people have been asking for, at the very least, centuries. That is, how does the outer weather, the environment, affect our own inner psychological weather? Can something in the air, some lack of sunlight or some overabundance of moonlight, really make us, for lack of a better phrase, I hesitate to say it, but go crazy?
Yes. Let's say act abnormally. To ourselves, at least to ourselves, in the ways we've come to see ourselves.
Here are the facts.
There is a common wisdom that floats around the internet and has been around for a long time, that weather in some ways can affect people's moods, how they feel, whether or not they're excited to wake up in the morning, or, if they're feeling a little sad now and then. And there is this idea it has a name that is kind of delightful, but at the same time, it's just delightful to speak of. It's called SAD, Seasonal Affective Disorder.
SAD.
Yes, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on.
Yeah, we're just planting the seed for SAD. We're planting sad seed here.
It will be fruitful later on. Now, there's an unrelated idea that my wife and I have talked about a lot of times because of her involvement with children in a school environment, of whether or not the moon can actually affect us as well. The amount of light that's being reflected upon us by the moon. Really, that's what they're talking about, where the moon is and how much light is being reflected. Can this make us feel different? Yeah. Unstable, perhaps.
Yeah. This is an ancient idea, and it goes in a couple of different directions. The ancient idea is the concept that the moon, maybe not so much the light, sometimes it's light, sometimes it's just the idea that a more visible moon means a moon is physically closer. This dates back all the way to philosophers like Aristotle and the often hilariously incorrect historian Pliny the Elder, from the Roman historian. They thought that the brain was the moistest organ in the body, and that therefore, like the oceans, it was the most susceptible to the insidious influences of the moon because of the way the moon can affect the tides in the oceans. And this idea, which again is ancient, has gone through many different iterations and names. Sometimes it was called the lunacy effect or the Transylvania effect. And the belief, survived the fall of the Roman Empire. It survived the fall of the ancient Greeks in the Middle Ages when it was just commonly accepted that some people turn into wolves. Some people are in league with infernal powers and they turn into wolves, and that's just how the cookie crumbles, right? They of course thought that the moon had these unholy influences even on people who say their prayers at night, and the old wolfsbane reference. Yeah,
the full moon is a weird thing.
It's a weird thing.
Back in the 19th century, there was even this thing that you could argue in court that you could argue that somebody was not guilty by reason of the full moon. Let's say if you're a defense lawyer and you're representing somebody, and they would make their claim that this quote-unquote lunatic client was not accountable for whatever he or she did because the full moon was there, and we all know how the full moon affects us, especially when we're turning into wolves and such. Just kidding. This is now the 19th century, so we've moved beyond werewolves
I don't know.
Not fully, but we moved a bit beyond werewolves.
1800s, Eastern Europe, people were still certain, and in less, in less densely populated areas in the world today, belief in physical shapeshifters, it's still around, it's not as popular.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there's a lot to be said there on the full moon. There's a ton of things here about how the full moon can possibly affect us.
So that's the interesting part, right? Werewolves aside, ancient Rome aside, the belief in this relationship between the moon waxing and people acting unstable persists in the modern day. You'll see the lunar cycle blamed for everything from spikes in suicide attempts and psychiatric hospital admissions to emergency room calls and reports to traffic accidents to dog bites and more and more and more.
And again, just taking it back to my wife and just for a second, she believes, this is kind of her theory or her hypothesis, is that the amount of light shining down on a darkened earth at any given time can affect sleep patterns. The way a child or an adult falls asleep, how long it takes to fall asleep, how well they're able to sleep just because of an increased amount of light within a room, unless there are blackout curtains or something like that. She thinks that can have an effect on the next day, essentially.
I see. Yeah, it's a disturbance in circadian rhythm, right? That's a good argument. I would want to hear the opinion too of how that if light is the cause there ultimately of some sort of disturbance in otherwise normal behavior, is it dependent on the type of light? Is that what creates the disturbance? Because now we live in a place where many, many, many people have artificial lights, whether they're even just computer screens or television screens, on while they sleep. So is a disturbed circadian rhythm the new normal? I could definitely see it being a really solid proposition in the days before electricity. I like maybe the disturbance has changed over time because of the rise of electric lights.
Well, yeah, I would just say from, not to get into an argument about this, but at my home, the moon's light comes into our windows at my house to such a significant effect that it looks like we've got lights on outside when there's a full moon compared to when there's even a half moon or lesser.
Do you feel that's pushing you closer to lycanthropy, or?
I'm not sure, but it certainly does affect my ability to get to sleep, and just personally. And I just wonder how much of an effect that would be outside of computer screens, outside of artificial light.
And yeah, that's one of my big questions. There would be the type of light. You know what I mean? Is it UV thing? Is it something in the LED displays? People are still debating about this, and there's an interesting scientific quibble here. Psychiatrists across the planet, and certainly throughout the West, including people like Miami psychiatrist Arnold Lieber, have argued less about light and more about water. The idea that, just like Aristotle and Pliny said, the full moon has an effect on behavior because the human body is almost 80% water. So again, maybe the moon is disrupting something about the way water functions in our nervous system specifically. Other people, not just psychiatrists, tend to agree, and large groups of people tend to agree that the moon does something wonky to human beings. There was a survey a few years back that said around 45% of college students believe, yes, the moon can affect human behavior in increasing their likelihood of doing something unusual for them. That's the thing. It's all case by case. Unusual for them. For someone, unusual might be staying up till 3 a.m. and eating a pint of ice cream. For other people, unusual may be, robbing a Toys R Us. I'm trying to think of things that aren't around so we don't get any angry letters.
That's a good choice. Or Toys R Us or Radio Shack somewhere.
There we go.
Maybe a Blockbuster kept its doors unlocked.
A Media Play. There are still Sears in Alaska. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, there you go.
So This is interesting because this isn't just cherry picking one survey. Other surveys seem to indicate that mental health professionals might be more likely than the average person to believe in this relationship. And sectors of law enforcement, this should not surprise anybody, whether you yourself are an LEO or whether you have one in your friend group or your family. A lot of members of law enforcement share this belief. As a matter of fact, back in the 1970s, the International Association of the Chiefs of Police put their money where their mouth is. They commissioned a study to discover whether there was any scientific basis to the belief that the full moon makes people, let's not say crazy, let's say weird.
What do we know what they found?
We'll tell you after a word from our sponsor. Here's where it gets crazy. Oddly enough, multiple studies, not all the studies, but the majority of studies conducted in this field or toward this question have found no discernible scientific evidence that the full moon has any sort of physiological effect on the human mind. So we can bust the water myth first. Before we get to that, please note, everyone, the way we phrased that finding, that the full moon does not have any sort of physiological effect on the human mind. That is different from a psychological effect, right?
Yeah.
So there's a dilemma there. But we're pretty sure as a species that if the moon has some sort of deleterious effect on human beings, it is not due to the water content of our bodies.
Let's go to the Scientific American with some quotes that list the problems with this whole water gravity theory. Like, is the moon actually changing the water inside of us? It says, quote, "First, the gravitational effects of the moon are far too minuscule to generate any meaningful effects on brain activity, let alone behavior. As the late astronomer George Abell of the University of California, Los Angeles noted, a mosquito sitting on your arm exerts a more powerful gravitational effect on us than the moon does." Now, that's intense. This is me speaking outside of the quote. That's an intense fact, if it is indeed a fact, and it was said by a former astronomer, so we must believe it. Let's continue on. Yet, to the best of our knowledge, there have been no reports of a mosquito lunacy effect. So there's a little biting remark there. Let's go on. Second, the moon's gravitational force affects only open bodies of water, such as oceans and lakes, but not contained sources of water, such as the human brain.
That's pretty rock solid.
It really is. It is contained within our skulls.
This last one's the most interesting to me.
Yes. Quote, "Third, the gravitational effect of the moon is just as potent during new moons, when the moon is visible to us, as it is during full moons."
So,
the light of the moon is a more likely candidate for affecting us. I'm just kidding, but it is.
Sure. I mean, well, let's find out. Going back to water, what this means is that the perception that we have, while it does hold its own internal logic, there's some analog there. The moon affects water in certain ways or in certain, situations, then why not the human brain? What's so special about the water in the human body? Nothing except temporarily its location. This means that if we want to dive into the belief that there's some sort of causal relationship between the moon and specifically crime, right? If we want to look at law enforcement data, then we will need to reject the water myth or the water part of the moon myth, and we'll need to regard, at least to some degree, the huge amount of anecdotal evidence from police officers across the planet, because a lot of these folks wholeheartedly believe in this, but maybe not the way you think, because often, people who work in law enforcement are trained to apply critical thinking. So they will, hopefully, if they're paying attention and training, be some of the more skeptical members of society at large. So let's consider the work of a guy named David Hunter. David Hunter was a retired deputy from Knox County, Tennessee. In his book, The Moon is Always Full, he collected multiple stories of police officers relaying strange events. Let's call them lunar war stories. things that happened while they were on duty during the full moon. However, Hunter does not believe that there is a physiological mechanism at play here. Instead, he believes it is squarely something in the sphere of the psychological. He says that the moon-crime relationship or perception thereof is a matter of self-fulfilling prophecies. And he notes, he says, hey, most cops are adrenaline junkies. If nothing happens on a graveyard shift, they get, disappointed. So the full moon gives the cop a reason to investigate things he might usually ignore.
Aha. So just the fact that it is a full moon, the police officer thinking to him or herself, oh, it's a full moon. Mm-hmm. I got to check this out.
Right. I've seen the movies. I've seen the tropes. Or, it's similar to, I guess, Bader Meinhof too, where, you hear Turn the Beat Around once, and then, or you think of the song and then you feel like you've heard it 3 times in the past 48 hours, but have you? Or were you just noticing more,
Are you using Turn the Beat Around as like a verb, like I did a thing, I turned the beat around?
I mean the song.
Okay.
But yeah, you turn the beat around if you'd like,
But this doesn't take into account, I'm just imagining, I'm not poo-pooing Hunter's writing here. I'm just saying there's a difference between investigating, like having something to investigate and choosing to investigate something. Mm-hmm. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is a police officer generally is going to respond to calls that come through, especially a uniformed police officer that's in a patrol vehicle mm-hmm. or is on patrol. They will get called to a thing to investigate something, or they will observe something and investigate it, right? Those are generally the 2 ways in which a report is going to get generated for, something that the police officer did that evening.
I see where you're going. Okay.
I don't know how them choosing to or not to investigate something would differ with the moon.
Because that would also happen. What I think you're raising is a fascinating point, because in the order of operations, right, the chain of events, their decision to whether or not to investigate something, aka do their job, occurs after something has already happened, right? So they are reacting to an event.
Hopefully, rather than just going out there and whatever.
Well, there's no crime tonight. I guess I better start some, right? Yeah, I doubt that. Yeah. But I see what you're saying. It's very important, because then that means that their decision has very little to do with whether or not there is a higher number of incidents during the evening of a full moon, right?
Yeah, one would have to come before the other.
Okay. And interesting, too, because I feel like you're a big proponent of the light argument here.
I'm just feeling it because it's just what I believe.
Too. Well, what about when a full moon is out during the day?
Oh, yeah.
And it's observable.
Oh, man. Crazy.
Pandemonium.
Kids everywhere are like, the moon! You're like, that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if anybody else remembers this, but I remember very clearly the first time I saw the moon during the day, and I thought the jig was up. I thought it was the end. You know what I mean? I was like, well, the quality's going to fall off a little bit at the end, so we had a good run.
Well, that is a weird thing. I wonder how universal the concept is. I think there's a sense growing up that the sun is out or the moon is out.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the moon is out at night, the sun is out at day, and you cannot have both, because how could it be night and day? That's not a thing. That's not possible. But then you begin to realize that the sun and moon, like all things, are a sliding scale or a spectrum. Almost all things. It's this weird function of reality. Night and day are just part of the same wheel, man.
Yeah, that's true. So let's go back, because we do have to point out, in all fairness, to the retired Deputy Hunter, that he is, by his own admission, not a scientist. He is collecting this in a way that's very similar to the way someone would collect folklore. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So let's go to members of academia, members of the Ivory Tower, the Capital A Academy.
Finally.
University of California, Irvine criminology professor Karis Kubrin calls this perception amongst LEOs a kind of confirmation bias, adding that the officers are looking for evidence that confirms their pre-existing belief. Pre-existing is a phrase I inserted into that quotation. So let me not mislead you, fellow listeners. This is something personally, and it's just one person's opinion, that I could get behind because we know that happens. We know this happens often to everyone. We build coincidences, or we curate coincidence in a way that most aids and abets our own narrative. So you could go through a troublesome traffic light 50 times, right? And maybe it's always green, right? Except for the 12 times that you happen to catch it when it's a red light. And then by time 11, you're like, this light sucks. This happens all the time. How much of my life have I spent here waiting at this POS traffic light? And then, the way other people work, if you say that, especially if you're complaining about traffic, other people are not going to go, what is wrong with you? That light is awesome. I looked at my stats for that light, and buddy, I am green 65% of the time. No, they're going to go, yeah, man, traffic lights blow. I don't know what it is. It's like they should just paint them red because the color never changes.
There are very few of us, but there are a few of us who would take the side of the traffic light just by default because somebody's complaining.
Oh, yeah. I don't want to get too far into this, but I've been involved in some weird traffic light conversations. Do you know how easy those systems are to hack?
Yeah.
It is frightening, dude. It is frightening how little effort it would take to totally collapse some traffic systems in cities here in the U.S. We're supposed to be a developed country.
Well, in Atlanta, it takes about 3 broken lights to just screw up the whole thing.
I know. Yeah, we all call it a day at that point. That's why, yeah, it's pretty rough.
It really is.
Especially neighborhood we work in. It's funny. I'm doing an episode later this week. Spoiler alert for our show Car Stuff, which has hit the road again. And one of the things we're going to look at is the cost of traffic. Like, traffic is expensive. I had no idea. Forget millions, forget billions. It costs trillions of dollars a year.
Yeah, but dude, strategic traffic, if you've got a business that's on like a major road, traffic is the stuff, man.
I was thinking that, okay, this is a terrible idea. I want to preface this.
Okay.
This is a terrible idea. No one do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not cool.
Okay.
But it would work.
Oh, God.
I added that at the end. So we have a lot of traffic jams, right?
Mm-hmm.
In other cities, you'll see people who wait at traffic jams to sell things, right?
Yes.
So what if we had our worst traffic jams here in Atlanta tend to be on interstates. What if we had some kind of like side scooter type things that could go out when traffic is stopped, when it's gridlocked, and sell snacks, sell beverages, non-alcoholic, sell doodads, flowers, toys. It's like a rolling convenience store.
On the highways.
On the highway, on the shoulder of the highway, in places where, again, like 4:30 to 7:30, it's the only time they're open.
Yeah.
Because that's the only time traffic is slow enough for these people not to get killed.
Yeah.
Now, here are the 3 reasons it's a horrible idea. 1, I would want to operate it as a nonprofit and give the money to disadvantaged people, which is never going to fly with Atlanta's government. 2, we're talking about sending people out in traffic. Even if the speed is 0, that could very quickly become 60, and then we're just like one scrape up away from the whole thing collapsing.
Yeah, but I bet you could charge a premium on this is my solution for you.
Okay.
Because people are stuck in traffic, they can't escape on some exit because they know if they go escape on the exit to hit up whatever fast food joint or let's say a racetrack or QT or insert your gas station 7-Eleven here, they know it's just going to take even longer to get back on the highway. They won't be able to get where they're going. But if somebody, let's say, was on the side of the road and they could make it to you, if they could get to your car door, your window, roll it down, and that's all you got to do. Roll down your window and swipe your card, and you can have, let's just say, something as simple as some chips and an ice cold beverage. They will pay you like movie theater prices, I think.
Sure.
And if they're paying movie theater prices, not only can you pay for your staff and they'll have a pretty nice wage, you'll be able to donate a good chunk of that the way you wanted to donate it.
Again, the city government will never let it happen. But I like what you're saying, because then also think about this. The last problem, of course, I think I have a solution to. But the last problem is one of the biggest ones, which is it would further ruin, cripple traffic to have everybody trying to get to the shoulder at a stopping point. Of course, it's a very self-centered species, so there will be a lot of people in the middle who are like, hey, forget you, buddy. Bring that Arby's to me. I got things to do.
It's true.
But here's the solution. Instead of people, why don't we just send drones out?
That was good. That was literally the thing I wanted to bring up next.
Yeah, drones. You just need reliably, for them to operate at peak efficiency, you'd need a sunroof, though. So it's already kind of for the elite.
I mean, it would be anyway, if you're going to pay movie theater prices for anything.
Right. I guess there aren't a lot of people who are just scraping by so they could save up for their drone.
Yeah.
Chalupas.
Drone chalupas, man.
You know what? I apologize for derailing us here. Let us know what you think of this idea, Matt. You're kind of turning me back into a proponent of it.
I'd get in this venture.
Cool. I think I agree with you. Also, if we partner up with a fast food franchise, since we're already ruining the world with drones, then we could get them to sink some of the overhead costs for us.
There's this fast food chain that makes chicken sandwiches. Not the one you're thinking about. It's that one from Louisiana. If you had them with their chicken sandwiches, oh my goodness.
Food for thought. Literally, food for thought. Let's go back to sorry I got us to traffic from Folklore of the Moon, but let's go back to the Academy, capital A. There's another professor who attributes this perception, this causal perception between the moon and extraordinary behavior, to folklore rather than to science. Professor Elizabeth Loftus says she will not outright condone a correlation between the moon and craziness, but she does concede that, quote, maybe mentally ill people get weirded out by the full moon and behave in strange ways. If this is the case, then what we might be perceiving as a weird effect of moonlight or gravity or water or what have you may in fact just be a collection of isolated incidents wherein people who were already unwell were somehow triggered by a specific environmental event. And in these cases, maybe it just happened to be the moon. Maybe we're not paying enough attention to other things like an eclipse. People go nuts during an eclipse, for one reason or another. Back to what you said about religions. Some religions are founded on being able to predict an eclipse and then go absolutely ham when one happens.
They are wonderful.
They are. If you can get a spot where you get totality. But the moon alone is not the weather nor the environment entire. So we mentioned SAD earlier, but what exactly is it? How does it work? We'll tell you after a word from our sponsors.
And we are back. So let's get sad, everybody. Sorry.
That was
Sorry
great.
for that. So let's discuss seasonal affective disorder. It's more rare than probably the media would want you to believe or has made us believe, but it is indeed very much a real thing. And let's just talk about what it means. Seasonality, or this disorder, is reported by approximately 10 to 20% of people with depression. So that's somebody who already is feeling depression or having depression, and they are either saying this is a part of it or the entirety of their depression, the changes in season. Then 15 to 22% of those with bipolar disorder also, report that seasonality or seasonal affective disorder is also affecting them.
Right. Like I know what my variation may be in mood and emotion.
Peaks and valleys.
Peaks and valleys, exactly. And even correcting for that, I noticed some enormous valleys.
And there are some fascinating real reasons behind some of this stuff that, again, as we're talking a little bit more about the chemicals in our bodies and how those change, this stuff, it goes deeper and it speaks to our connection, humanity's connection to the sun.
Oh, sure. Yeah. According to the Mayo Clinic, SAD, or seasonal affective disorder, it's a type of depression that's related to changes in the seasons. It begins and ends around the same couple of times every year. And if you're like most people with this condition, your symptoms start in autumn. They begin in the fall. They continue into the winter months. You are lethargic, your energy is sapped, you feel moody. Less often, we have seen cases of people reporting SAD in the other direction in the spring or early summer. The signs and symptoms are going to be very familiar for anyone who has had these wintry blues before. You'll feel depressed most of the day, almost every day. The stuff that you enjoyed, video games, volleyball, cyberbullying, Twitter people or whatever, you don't enjoy it anymore. You have low energy, but even though you feel tired all the time, you cannot sleep. You also don't enjoy a lot of the food you used to like.
A lot of people report that they feel agitated when they're experiencing this, or sluggish, having a difficult time concentrating. Like, let's say if you're at school or at work, just can't really wrap your mind around one thing. Feeling hopeless, sometimes feeling guilty or worthless. Again, these are a lot of these symptoms of just overall depression too. Having frequent thoughts of death or suicide. Oof.
And there's some science to this, as you had said, Matt. We know that when your body, as long as you qualify as a human being, when your body is exposed to less sunlight, it produces more melatonin. Melatonin is the hormone that makes you sleepy. It's pretty popular in the West as a sleep aid nowadays. Then there's also a pretty solid idea called the phase shift hypothesis. The phase shift hypothesis proposes what we had just talked about earlier in the beginning of the show, and it says that shortened days cause the timing of our circadian rhythms to fall out of sync with the actual time of day because there's this delay in the release of melatonin. And just as your body, your flesh bag, begins craving these midday naps, your brain begins producing lower levels of serotonin.
Oh, the good one.
Yeah, the tickle. That's what I call it. Yeah, your brain stops making the tickle. That is with a capital T. So your mood, your appetite, your sleep, your sexual desire, none of them scratch the itch anymore. You don't get the tickle. What's the point of living if you don't have if you don't enjoy the way stuff tastes, if you're not excited about doing something, you're just sort of getting a participation grade.
Yeah, the tickle it's of the highest import, and that stinks to have it deadened a little bit or nullified in a way.
Yeah, and how, for instance, I'm a person who goes through, dark times pretty regularly.
No.
Yeah, right. So
me too.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons we get along so well. But we did find the science here, and then we not only found the science, we found beyond the microcosmic neurochemical mechanisms of every individual brain, we found that societies wherein people regularly experience this deprivation of light to an extreme degree, the societies have banded together and created group solutions or attempts at group solutions for sunlight deprivation. That's why a lot of people living in the Arctic Circle, a lot of people living in, again, Scandinavian countries that have the infrastructure to support community solutions like this, they've done some groundbreaking work with light therapy. And we found some pretty cool examples of this too.
Oh, yeah. There's an Atlantic article called Will Norway Ever Beat the Winter Blues that you shared, Ben. And in here it talks about a southern town in Norway called Rjukan, or Rjukan. And it's kind of in a bit of a valley between two large mountains. And during certain times of the seasons there, the sun basically hits the peaks of the mountains or high up on the mountains, but doesn't actually ever get down into the valley. So it doesn't actually ever touch the town for long periods of time. And they figured out a way to get these large, I think 17-meter wide mirrors that reflect the sunlight from the higher peaks of that mountain down into the town square. And it's a fascinating idea. It's genius and very simple in a way, but just the concept of bringing a little bit of light into the town square so that people during midday, like I think it was noon to 2 or something like that, people can go out and experience sunlight in a time when they haven't felt it on their skin in days, if not weeks. And another thing interesting that's happening in that town, in the surrounding areas as well, there's a company called Brainlit. It's a Swedish company. And what they do is they outfit a whole building, sometimes a classroom, sometimes a home, with smart lighting that mimics day and night cycles, essentially. So the idea here is to get a human being's circadian rhythms back on track just by having their eyes experience the light and the feeling on their skin, all those things, have it occur indoors rather than outside being affected by the sun.
And then again, we return to the nature of the light, right? It's a specific type of light, correct?
Yeah, it's HCl and LED, the two solutions they have, and they call it biocentric lighting. It's really interesting stuff. If you want to learn more, we are not promoting this company or this brand, but it's called Brainlit, BRAINLIT.SE/EN. That's where we were looking at it.
And we know that the research in this field is continuing. Light, at least, affects us more than we might like to believe. This is not, hey, I'm going on record, man. You know I respect you. This is not me agreeing with the light hypothesis lunacy. This is not.
Okay.
This is not me agreeing with that because I couldn't find any science to bear it out, but that doesn't mean it's not true. It just means maybe the science hasn't caught up with the human belief yet.
I told you it's my belief. I don't got no science.
But it might be out there, and it's worth searching for. In some people with bipolar disorder, we also know that spring and summer can bring on symptoms of mania, or a less intense form of mania, hypomania, and fall and winter can be a time of deep depression. Here's the ultimate answer, though. Not just counting light, which is only one part of our environment. Let's think of the weather, all the other things the weather is: wind, barometric pressure, humidity, things like that.
Pressure is a big one.
Pressure is a huge one. And it turns out that everyday weather can change your mood if you are already unhappy. If you're already having a bad time, don't worry. Weather can make it worse. If you're in a good mood, you are less susceptible to changes in environment or changes in weather affecting you or your mental state.
I'll go with this. I've got stuff to add. I'll bring it back later, but let's go through this.
Okay, so first things first. 2008 study associated with the APA, American Psychological Association, published in the journal Emotion, indicates that weather can indeed mess with you if you're already feeling down in the dumps, morose, sad, etc. Researchers evaluated the personalities and moods of more than 1,200 adults through these daily questionnaires. So they're self-reporting, they're a little sticky, but these questionnaires were cross-referenced with the local weather during the day when they answered these questions, and they found that climate factors like temperature, sunlight, wind, precipitation, so on, had no impact whatsoever on positive mood. But the temperature, wind, and sunlight did have a measurable effect on negative mood. And when we say negative, we're using it in the colloquial way, not the scientific way. Negative in science means absence of. Here, it means bad. So yeah, right. So increased temperatures had a positive effect on bad moods, while increased wind and decreased sunlight had a worsening effect on a bad mood, although these effects did vary from one individual to another in terms of the degree of change, like how extremely or profoundly they were affected. It did bear out across, again, more than 1,000 people that there was some sort of correlation. And additionally, this is just a lead we're going to drop. We're not going to follow up. Additionally, there are a surprising number of studies into the correlation between high temperatures and crime. And from what we can tell, it is real. When the heat spikes, more crimes occur.
Hot times, summer in the city, my friend.
Back of your neck, right?
But no, it's true. And from what I was reading just this morning, the science isn't necessarily in on that, but it does make sense on a very base level. If it is warm outside and it is warm inside, a lot of people will probably be going outside. There will be more people on the street. There will be more people, mulling around. There will be more people with bikes, more people making a trip with their briefcases or whatever they're carrying with them that may have something in there.
Perhaps more opportunity for crime.
More opportunity, like more victims, like potential victims in an area, and also more people who are not holed up in their house because it's cold and rainy, who would be the, potential mugger or burglar or whatever. It does feel like there's a real correlation there. Like if you just imagine yourself, if it's cold and rainy, making the decision to go out and do something nefarious versus if it's hot and you've got nothing else to do and very dry. I don't know. It feels real.
So there we have it, though. We know that the weather is not conspiring against us because the weather itself, as far as we know, is not sentient, right? And if we go down that route, we end up at the Gaia hypothesis, which is a fascinating thought experiment, superorganisms at all. While there's no scientific proof that a full moon affects the human brain in the way that folklore tells us it does, the strength of confirmation bias and self-fulfilling prophecy might render that exact same science moot. Because some people may be having stability issues during the full moon just because they believe that's what happens. We all grow up in a world where full moons are portrayed as harbingers of doom or eeriness in works of fiction, right? Dating back centuries. So of course we believe it. We've been brought up to believe that. Some medical and law enforcement professionals may be suffering from their own illusory pattern recognition, but it also seems like they are a little bit more likely than the average Jane or Joe, whatever, to believe in this correlation because they feel they've personally experienced it. And while the moon may not affect your mind, the sun most certainly does in ways that you might not even notice.
As can barometric pressure, bringing about some pain. It affects my dog. If my dog feels barometric pressure changing, especially if it's lessening, she gets all freaked out because she knows a storm's coming. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's like half an hour to 20 minutes before a storm starts. It's weird. And that's why, we didn't even really talk about rain much at all.
No, we haven't even talked about rain. Luckily, we did. I think we have an earlier video on dogs and other animals being able to predict the weather, right? Did we do that? Did I make it up?
I think that is one of the other video shows.
I'm remembering a different timeline, maybe.
I think it's one of the other video shows.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, if it's one of the other video shows, I guess you could still check it out.
Yeah, it was probably Brain Stuff or what was the other one called?
Oh, no. What the Stuff? No.
What the Stuff?
Oh, gosh. Whew, bury it.
That was Paul's favorite thing that we ever made.
Sow
here.
the earth with salt. Bury that. Let no stone stand on another video stone there. But anyhow, what do you think, folks? Is there more to the moon myth than meets the eye? As Matt and I and Noel and Paul have always said and always prided ourselves on, we're not afraid to have differing opinions. And it feels like I'm a little more on the skeptical side of this. And it feels like, Matt, not to put words in your mouth, it feels like you are a little more on board with maybe the science isn't there yet and the science might find something proving this hypothesis about light.
It's one of those things that feels like the science should have been here a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And it just feels correct to me, but I acknowledge that it's probably not scientifically valid.
I don't know, though, because we know that light does affect sleep patterns. Like, it seems pretty solid.
Feeling and knowing are two very different things.
Mm-hmm. What's the weather like in your neck of the woods, fellow conspiracy realist? Tell us your craziest full moon war stories. Bonus points if they somehow involve shapeshifters.
Yeah. Yes. Or UFOs. Either way.
Or UFOs. Or shapeshift. If you've seen someone transform into a UFO,
yeah,
you win.
Oh my God!
I don't know what you win, but we'll figure out something.
If you have video proof, go ahead and you can replace me as host on this show.
No.
I'll put that out there. If you've got video proof of weather affecting something with a UFO shapeshifter, yeah, you're in. I accept.
You can appear on an episode. Please don't pod people. My good friend Matt Frederick here. Let's say somebody does have that kind of stuff, Matt. How can they get it to us?
Oh, well, you can find us on Twitter where we're Conspiracy Stuff, or on Facebook where we're also Conspiracy Stuff, or you can join our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy, where you can meet all sorts of other yous. Well, of course, when I say you, I mean you, but then also you. So there's so many different yous out there. What I'm saying is we all get together as we and have discussions about the show. I hope that wasn't weird enough for you.
Alternate versions of yourself and so on. Yes. If you do not care for the social meds, you can always call us. We have a phone number. That is a true story. Maybe wait till the moon is full and dial in.
Yes, we are 1-833-STDWYTK. Leave us a message. We might do something with it. We might just listen to it in a room in a circle.
Turn the beat around.
Then your message is inserted there. If you don't want to do any of that stuff. Oh, by the way, Instagram, we're Conspiracy Stuff Show.
Oh, that's right. That's a very good point.
And you can find us there. You can find Ben. It's pretty easy, actually, if you type in Ben Bolin. I've tried it a couple times. You can find him.
You can also find Matt if you are intrepid.
Yes, but the difficulty level is higher. That's actually not true because my iHeart is literally in my username.
Oh, boy.
Great idea.
If none of that quite bags your badgers, hangs your moon, or heliostats your sparse sunlight of life, we have one last way to contact us. Even though it's 2019 still as we record this, we have an old-fashioned email address. You can write to us. We are conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com. Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio's How Stuff Works. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.